What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to look back at the finale of our trilogy here, Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, a game that, may I just say to open this video up, is unbelievably good. It's so different than the other two, and I think we have quite the tale to tell of where Budokai went from 1 to 3. But firstly, may I just say, it's been a long time since I played any of these. I did a video on Budokai 1, 2, and 3. They're all so special. They all have memories because it's the first time, or I remember the first time. Oh, okay, the first one is so, I would say, story-oriented, right? Literally reliving and even doing the freaking cutscenes, right? Number 2 has, like, the grid system, right? Like, moving the pawns. And although kind of odd or just, like, different, I remember as a kid, like, just jumping into it. I don't know if I would have remembered it was Budokai 2, but I remember it. Then you got Budokai 3, flying in the air, right? A lot of dead land, there's not a lot of things there, but you can look for Dragon Balls, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're progressing through the story in a very, I would say, cut up kind of way that's maybe a little reminiscent of 2, but also just its own thing. Budokai 3, I gotta be real, is the best one of these 3. I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't know if the critic scores back me up. I don't know what public, perception of it is, but I'm here to tell you my own personal opinion. Budokai 3 is the best one, I would say, by miles over 1 and 2, and it's simply because of the gameplay. This game is so much fun to play, and if you actually start to break down all of the new additions, which we'll do it, to an extent, they just make for an amazing game. The feel of actually battling somebody, and I could imagine, I don't know when I played it. Again, I think I've gotten Budokai 3 confused with other games before, but I can tell you for a fact that Budokai 3 as a young person, right? I imagine watching it, and when you see Sparking Zero right now, I think we see the same thing, right? Like when we see Budokai 3, we're like, oh my god, like this is it, this is peak, this is as good as it gets. And then now when you see Sparking Zero, you think, man, remember when I thought 3 was like Sparking Zero? But you know what? It's got a lot of similarities. You got a lot of environmental things going on. You have dodges. You have the beam clashes. You have trying to predict the other person's move when they're doing like their super ability, and you can just get freaking pummeled into the earth if you're pressing the wrong ones. So much stuff is crammed in this game. The roster is incredible. I'm just trying to like rapid fire, at least in the beginning of the video, but this game is so freaking good. And I didn't really know. I know that I liked Budokai and Tenkaichi, like I've played them growing up, but I wasn't like married to them. I couldn't remember, one from the other. Going through these 3 now, oh, I'm so glad I did it. I want to get to the Tenkaichi. I want to get to like Raging Blast and all that. Not going to get to all of them before Sparking Zero, but I'm glad I played these 3 because this is really where it started. And I think, I see a lot of similarities between Budokai 3 and now Sparking Zero. So, firstly, I want to show you guys because I actually have it. This is actually the newest game, I think, to my physical collection. Got the full thing. It's actually kind of hard to find the full. You have to go online to do it. I found this game at a retro store, and it didn't have the manual, and it was actually $10 cheaper than what, I got it for. And I said, oh, man, like it's close. I want to get it, and considering it was $10 cheaper, but I needed the manual, right? Number 1, I mean, come on, such a good case. I'm very glad and very proud to say now I have all 3 of them. The Tenkaichi ones are going to be infinitely harder. Obviously, we know 2 and 3. I think 3 specifically is like $200 physically. But, okay, let's get into the game a little bit. So, like I said in the beginning, you think of 1, I think of 1, and I think of the story. You think of 2, you think of like the grid pawn type system. You think of 3, and the number 1 thing that stands out is this game is actually kind of deeper than it shows itself to be, at least in the beginning, right? You're flying around, and there's not a lot to do. There is like side conversations to have, and there's like abilities you can pick up and whatnot. There's also a little bit of requirement of grinding. There's obviously like the battle kind of points that are laid out, in the 2 different maps, and you can do it as much as you want. You might face unique characters depending on which character that you are, and that kind of gets into it right there. You can play as quite a few, I think like 6 or 7 of them, Piccolo, Goku, all them. Now, Goku's is the longest, right? Goku faces a lot of battles. Goku faces the most storyline. And then if you play as the other ones, which I did play several of them, right? You play as them, and they fill in the story. They fill in their part in the story. And, naturally, some of them are not going to have as many moments as others. And I'm actually kind of glad I chose Goku first, right? Because you got the leveling system. You're leveling up and you're saying, okay, what am I gonna do into health? Am I gonna do it into ki? Like all this stuff. And you have to make some tough choices, and you're not gonna level it up naturally all the way. So you got to make some tough picks, right? You do Goku, you fight them all, right? You go through like you go through the sagas as we've done 2 times before. But again, what I think I can respect so much about this game, even from the story perspective, is I like how they kind of cut it. You know what I mean? Like, again, each one of these games tells roughly the same story in slightly different ways that I think makes it at least somewhat engaging. And there's not going to be too much, time we're going to spend on it, because I think the best part of the game is the actual battles. But I will say that, like, leaning into that, it's one thing to, play the story. And, in the first game, the first time I've played a Dragon Ball game in many, many years, I'm into it. We're going through Vegeta, and we're going through the Cell games. We're going through, Frieza's arc and all that. Cool, okay? You do Majin Buu, all that jazz. Fantastic, and 2 and whatnot. Okay, eventually you do it over and over again, but in this game, I just wanted to get to the battles, because once you jump into that, oh my god, it takes another step forward. So, like I said, a lot of new additions when it comes to the actual gameplay. I've talked about, if you go back and you watch my videos on 1 and 2, again, because I haven't played these in years, I'm not a good fighter. Now, I wouldn't compare these games to like the Mortal Kombats and Street Fighters of the world, but they take a little technique. They're not as hard. I think I got the hang of them much more than I would have got the hang of, different games like that. But, there's still a little bit of challenge to it. And I think I've gotten more and more comfortable as the games have gone on. But there are some things, some gameplay elements that I was just like flat out refusing to do, or, I just wouldn't handle it. And, it comes back to bite you actually several times. One thing I felt good about this game is whether it was because of grinding, because again, like there is a little bit of that, whether it's, okay, you have to be a little strategic in where you're putting your levels, or you just like really start to figure out the game. Like you time your blocks better. You can dodge in this one, which does take, some of the energy, but you can be dodging, you can zip behind them. You can do a lot of things to, I guess, stand a better chance of facing the enemy. In Dragon Ball 2, what we talked about in that video, like the Majin Buu stuff forward, oh my freaking god, right? Now there is purposely like unbalancing kind of that happens in these games, but like fighting all the different forms of Majin Buu, Jesus Christ, in 2 wasn't possible, and I got my butt kicked when I was actually doing quite okay. In this game, man, I like figured it out. Did I die a few times? Yeah, I died a few times, but not many. I think it's just because I number one, I got decently okay at the game, but I think they kind of, I don't know, I feel like they gave me more. They give you more ways of defending yourself, different ways, like with Goku, or really with any of them, right? You got different like charging phases, and all the systems work really well, right? Like when somebody goes into like their ultimate, and they basically have a timer. You have like the energy bars that are constantly going down, and they can do a lot of damage to you, but you realize, okay, if I do the same thing, then we're kind of even. I can do damage to them, they can do damage to me, then they can get exhausted. That's another new feature in this game where they're going to be panting, and it takes a while to break out of it. There's so much kind of like under the radar strategy in this game that the others don't even, get close to, right? On top of, your different phases, or, Goku being able to, I think, go up to like Super Saiyan 4 or something and say, I don't even know how far you could go in some of the other ones, because I just didn't even really try it. Like if there was any kind of evolutions that you could do, didn't really try to breach that. But in this one, oh my God, I was going Super Saiyan 3/4 as much as humanly possible once I got there. And, all of the characters, they continue to be very, very unique. I think that's another element of, just each game kind of building off of each other, right? Like this game looks beautiful. This game is a really, really nice looking game, but the individuality, right? Like the uniqueness is still there from like their super moves or their, super kind of states, or, whatever you want to call it. They're all so unique, and they were all like a blast. I always do it. I'll play the story, and if it's segmented, right, I'll play a couple different people's story, and then I'll always go into, like world tournaments and try out the thing. And, I like to try every single character. And this one, I had the most anticipation. I was going through a couple of these characters through the story, and it's like, okay, let me just try out like Frieza and Majin Buu. Like, let me try these people out in the tournament, because, oh my God, like, facing them, they seem freaking nuts. And I don't know, like, I mentioned the Sparking Zero thing, right? Like, just how good it looks. It's hard to, like, say it in words. It's why I kind of go back and forth between my face and footage. I mention or I talk about the gameplay mechanics, but the game is also just so much fun to watch, even as you're playing it, right? It feels the most Dragon Ball. Again, you got like those clashes and you got kind of cinematic scenes where are they a little bit repetitive or can they get repetitive? Yes. But you know, how many games, even at that time, right? Like they press a move, right? So they press maybe square and you're trying to figure out if they did press square, you got to get lucky. And if you get lucky, you know, you're going to deal some damage to them, or, you know, if it's the second or third time, you're just not going to get killed. It's about as cinematic of a fight that you can possibly get, and the environment helps with that. You know, I think 2, they started to do the things where I don't remember if 2 you can actually like bust through things. I think maybe, but 2 is more like, okay, we'll take you to a different area, you know, in the map, right? If you get hit kind of out, you'll go to a different place. This one has that / you're gonna get busted through like freaking cliffs, you know, like rock sides and stuff. Like you're gonna take some serious damage if you're in the wrong spot, but it just feels so dynamic and cinematic when you're doing these beams and then you have to, you know, tap the button to see who wins. Or there was even a time, I don't know if I captured it, but oftentimes, whether the AI can read my mind or not, we would do the beam clash and we'd be too close to each other. There was one match where it killed both of us, you know, because we were too close. So we did the beam. I couldn't even tap it because it just immediately kind of canceled out and we both died. And then, you know, it gives you the loss because you have to like outright win. And I mean, I got frustrated a little bit, I guess, in that moment, but it's such a feeling of epicness. Like it feels real as I guess it can feel, but it feels like Dragon Ball. It feels like you're watching with them zipping around or them, you know, dodging to lift up their leg, right, to kind of block. I mean, it just looks so cool, and it is so cool just to watch it, even as you're playing it. I feel like I kind of rapid fired this one because, you know, when I think about 1 and 2, are there some weaknesses? Yes. Again, like the biggest weakness of 3 is generally, again, you're playing through the same story. Like, I don't even think, in terms of how far it pushes it, does it even push it past what Budokai 2 did? I don't think so. I think it actually gets there maybe somewhat faster. Again, it kind of depends on the character that you're playing. Like, Goku took me a while, and I was like, okay, so this is like the average length per character. I think I did Piccolo next, which, again, just a phenomenal, I love Piccolo as a character, but very cool fighting style and all that stuff as well. But I beat Piccolo in like a quarter or a half of the time, and I was like, oh, well, it makes sense because you're just kind of picking like their arcs or their parts of the overall story. I mean, look, when these games are coming back basically back-to-back years, you know, obviously, right, like it's going to happen. You're going to have to, you don't even have a lot of new material, you know, to go off of. So obviously you're going to have to kind of dip your feet in the same stuff. That is the biggest weakness. But, you know, again, looking back at it and thinking about 1, 2, 3, like, well, number one, you could probably pick any of these and be generally okay with the story because it does tell the story in Budokai 3. I was a little worried because, and I would say, I guess maybe this did pop up. 3 and 2 have a situation where, like, they kind of pick when they talk. I think there's maybe a little bit more talking in 3 in terms of, like, actual, like, voice lines and them actually recording them versus 2. You know, going into 1, I think they were trying to stick so close to the story. It was about as cinematic as you could ask for, right, with like legitimate cutscenes. That then 2 and 3, you know, had less and less cutscenes. There's really not even what I would consider cutscenes, right? So I was a little bit afraid of that. Like, does the personality come through? Well, I don't even think I've talked about this in the past. Voice acting crushes it. Like hearing Majin Buu and hearing Goku and all that. Also, may I just say, when you're floating around, right? There's something so simple about it. And again, it takes me back to my childhood because I would remember, and like, I think I rented these. I don't think I ever owned probably any Dragon Ball game. So I would rent these, and I would also go to my grandmother's house. My cousin would have the game too. And the whole flying over the world was just something I always remembered. I would go there, walk in, he'd already be playing it, and I would just see it. And it just takes you back to the childhood. But might I just say, it has a rather simple yet effective way of doing it. Like, there's nothing too special with just, like, gliding over it. It's actually a little heavy, but let me also just throw out, and I can't really, you know, because of YouTube systems and all that stuff, the sound. I mean, it's not actually, like, the music and stuff is something we haven't really talked about in the past Dragon Ball games. The music, the guitar, you know, riffs that are going on when you're flying, holy dear Jesus, it's just so, it feels epic, although you're flying over like a barren wasteland, right? But it just sounds perfect. Like literally the repeating soundtrack is just perfect. I guess you could throw in the sound effects as well, because, when you're in the game and you're beating the living heck out of each other, right? What's another thing that really can enhance it overall is the sounds. So whether it's them, being hurt by each other, or shouting, or doing the kind of grunts, act, or, voice of like punching each other, a lot of like the zip kind of things, when they'll actually zip behind, or if they'll lift their leg, or the beam clashes or anything, the sound design in this game is spectacular, like a 10 out of 10. The music, 10 out of 10. I think, I glossed over, I think the visuals are awesome. I think it looks like a really, really nice game. I think I looked it up because I was doing a video on Sparking Zero on my main channel. I think this game might have sold the worst of the three. I think Budokai 1 did really well, 2 slightly less, 3, and then Tenkaichi that's when it started to raise back up, where I think Tenkaichi 3 actually was the highest of maybe even all 6 of these games, and then it got to the, Kakarats and Fighter Z's and all that stuff of the world. So, yeah, I love this game. I gotta be real. I think this is easily the best of the 3, just in terms of the fighting. You could fight over and over, and I would imagine, like, look, playing them, replaying them now, I'm playing it for the channel. I'm playing it in different ways sometimes. Like, most times I break out the PS2 to actually play them. I'm not playing it against, like, my wife or, like, people around, like, split screen or whatever. But I also think, that's another element that you think back to your childhood. And I can remember, fighting my cousin, all that stuff. Such a good game. And the replayability in this game, I think, beats the other two by a lot, because it's just so much fun to actually play. I think it's a mix of me finally getting it the best I can, at least right now, on top of all of the gameplay fighting enhancements that they made with Budokai 3. I think it's a phenomenal, and I keep looking back. I think we've done this with all of these. This game got like a 77. I forget what the other ones I think also got in the low to mid 70s. I don't know what's going on. If you release Budokai 3, okay, today with the kind of, situation, okay, well, Sparking Zero, but like if Budokai 3, I'm rating it right now, to give it in the mid to high 7s seems unbelievable. Maybe it was, too many of these in a row, or the story being the same, or, whatever it was, but does this game deserve a 77? Are you insane? This game was an absolute blast to play. So I'll leave it there. You let me know what you think in the comments. As we get closer, I want to do one more video on the Budokai series. We'll probably do it right before Sparking Zero. I want to talk about all 3 of them in one video. I do want to get to the Tenkaichis. I want to get to, like, Legacy of Goku on Game Boy. I'm going to do a lot of Dragon Ball videos over time. Give me a couple months per video, and we'll do that. So many more Dragon Ball games I have to still play, and I'll be making videos on as many as I can, okay? Thank you for watching. I'll see you all on the next one.